This is the OFN Today on the Our Lads Football Network as we talk Philadelphia Eagles football with Elliot Shores Parks, Eagles reporter for 94 WIP. Actually, it's Elliot Shore Parks because I'm not going to use the hyphen. But Elliot, I really appreciate you taking your time to talk to me and Ryan today about Eagles football.
All good, man. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, Ryan. So tell me, how do you know this guy?
NJ.com alums.
How long?
We're everywhere.
Elliot worked there longer than I did. I was only there 2 or 3 years, but Elliot showed me the ropes on an NFL beat when I was just a young college football pup.
I was lucky enough to work with Ryan for a few years. Now he's off, killing the game elsewhere. But I at least know someone that covers the Giants. I can get that inside scoop.
How long have you been covering the Eagles, Elliot?
I've been covering them for about 7 or 8 years now. I think this will be my 9th season of full-time traveling training camp and all that. So, I mean, especially covering a team like the Eagles, it feels like it's been 20 years. But they always keep it interesting.
All right, well, let's get right to it and talk about some of the big stories. First of all, what's going on with Jason Peters?
Yeah, so I think when Andre Dillard went down, the Eagles, I think everyone expected he would just move to left tackle, but that's not happening. He wants a pay raise to move from right guard to left tackle, and I don't blame him, honestly. It's a business. He's a commodity. It's his profession, like that. He has the right. He has the power right now. Left tackles are paid more than right guards. The Eagles moved on from Jason Peters for Andre Dillard. That was a business decision. In 2012, Jason Peters suffered an off-the-field injury, and they docked his salary. That was a business decision. So it's hard for me to sit here and say Peters should just move without a pay raise. And look, the Eagles need him to move. The Eagles' offensive line is one of the worst I've ever seen covering the Eagles. They've never go into a year with this many questions. Their tackles are both injured. The right guard is injured with either Peters there. So you have to protect the franchise, and the franchise is still Carson Wentz right now. So you have to pay Peters, get him over to left tackle. And
so that means at this point in time, you really don't have any idea who's going to start on more than 50% of the line combinations?
Well, it depends on injury. Lane Johnson has a lower body injury. He's missed about, I think, 9 straight practices. He's their starting right tackle. I'd assume he's ready for week 1. If it's not him, you're probably looking at Jordan Mailata, who's never taken a snap in a professional football game outside of preseason. So you're probably looking at Lane Johnson, Jason Peters at right guard, Jason Kelce at center. At left guard, you're looking at Isaac Seumalo, and I would assume Matt Pryor at left tackle unless they move Peters over. But until that happens, you're looking at Matt Pryor at left tackle, who's never played the position in a preseason game or a college game.
I know you just called Carson Wentz the franchise, Elliot. If there's a city that loves a quarterback controversy, it's Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts, does he play quarterback? Does he play nothing? Does he play a Taysom Hill role? What's his role as a rookie?
I don't think you're going to see him in a Taysom Hill role. I mean, Taysom Hill takes quite a bit of snaps. I think he's out there almost 16, 17 plays a game or something like that. I don't think you're going to take Carson off the field that much. Now, in training camp, he's been called the number 3 quarterback, and at points the snaps have been distributed that way. But overall, I think Nate Sudfeld ended up taking 54% of the team snaps, and Jalen Hurts was about 46%. So they were pretty split among the snaps where Carson wasn't on the field. And look, I like Nick Sudfeld. He's a good quarterback. He's a good backup. He wasn't a second-round pick. He wasn't a Heisman finalist. He wasn't playing in 2 national championship games. Jalen Hurts was a second-round pick for a reason, and it's clear when you watch him play. He's dynamic. He throws a great deep ball. So I could see how he could excel in a Taysom Hill role. But frankly, I think he's a better quarterback than Taysom Hill. And I think he'll just be the guy if Carson goes down. You might see him in some red zone or third down plays. But the problem with that is Carson's been one of the best quarterbacks in the leagues in those situations. I think he has 60 touchdowns to 1 interception in the red zone, and he's consistently been one of the best quarterbacks on third down. So maybe a handful of snaps, but I don't think you'll see a ton of Jalen Hurts unless Carson gets injured.
You probably saw me smirking. I forgot. You and our other buddy Dan Duggan at The Athletic might take the most detailed practice notes of anybody. The fact that he took 54% of the practice passes. I don't know many guys who do that. Let's flip sides of the ball, Elliot. Defense. the Eagles finally have a secondary. Like, it's been like 3 or 4 years, right, of like going down to Broad Street and picking dudes up to play cornerback. They don't have to do that anymore, right?
We'll see. I mean, look, you have Darius Slay, and you're right. That's the best cornerback they've had in a long time. They've gone into playoff games with guys like Shandon Sullivan, who's been a nice player for the Packers now, but at the time was a practice squad guy. So you do have that number one type corner that you're hoping will be a shutdown guy. Rodney McLeod, you feel good about him at safety. He had an underrated year last year. He'll now be a full year recovered from that season-ending ACL injury. So you think you're going to get good stuff from him. The question marks would be at the other safety spot and the other corner spot. At safety, they're moving Jalen Mills from corner to safety. I think he's had a phenomenal training camp. It looks like he'll play the role well. But until he does it, I think it's fair to question that a little bit. And then opposite Darius Slay, right now they have Avonte Maddox. Maddox came into the NFL as a nickel corner. They moved him to the outside, and he struggled there somewhat. I mean, you saw in the playoff game that he was beat by Allen Robinson quite a bit, and he's undersized. He's only 5'9", and you saw in training camp at times other receivers out-jumped him. So if you're going to have Darius Slay on the one side, he's following the number one receiver. He's, being that number one corner. In theory, Avonte Maddox is going to get a lot of targets, and I think you'll see teams really go after him until he can prove that he can make them pay.
What about Douglas and Jones? Is it possible those guys one of those guys gets traded?
I think it's definitely possible. The Eagles gave Craig James a 1-year contract, which ensures him a roster spot. He's a guy Jim Schwartz, their defensive coordinator, really likes. He took second-team reps at corner during training camp, and he's just a physical, hard-working corner that Jim Schwartz really likes. So he'll be on the roster. Sidney Jones and Rasul, it's hard to see them keeping both. Now, Avonte Maddox is dealing with a lower body injury, so maybe they keep one of them for a little. But this offseason, they had Rasul Douglas take a pay cut, which doesn't speak highly for really what they think of him. I think he's had a really good camp. I think he's better than Sidney Jones. But when you ask someone to take a pay cut, that says a lot. Sidney, a former second-round pick, has not practiced much, and that's been the story of his career so far. He struggled to stay healthy, missed a lot of team reps during training camp. So one of them is probably gone. In my opinion, if Sidney stays, that means Howie Roseman won. If Rasul Douglas stays, Jim Schwartz won. So we'll see how that dynamic plays out before Saturday.
Is Parks hurt? Yes.
Will Parks, yes. So the safety, they brought him in from Denver. He has a lower body injury. From what I'm told, it's probably a 3 to 4 week injury. I would lean a little more just because of the position he plays and that type of injury. It does take longer to get back. They were going to use him a lot. He was going to be their third safety. He was going to kind of play like a nickel role, a linebacker role, a safety role. So he was going to do a lot of different things. The fact that he's out, I think you'll see different personnel packages from them. You might see rookie Kayvon Wallace out of Clemson come in and get some snaps. But, yeah, I would expect Will Parks might even go on IR, especially now that it's only a 3-week thing.
All right, and wide receiver, let's flip it to the opposite side. Jeffrey, his health, how's that working? And it's an interesting battle. There's a lot of young receivers fighting for the last few roster spots.
Yeah, receiver is a position they invested a lot in this offseason, especially with how poorly their receivers played at times last year. Alshon Jeffrey suffered an Achilles injury in December. He has not done anything in practice yet. He was put on the PUP prior to the start of training camp. I would expect he would start the season on PUP, although I wouldn't completely rule out him making it on the initial 53 and then going to IR. So that's one possibility. Outside of that, the other receivers have played really well. Deshaun's healthy. He looks dynamic as ever in practice. And then you had a lot of rookies come through and play well. John Hightower, Quez Watkins, and Jalen Reagor was also playing really well prior to suffering a shoulder injury that's going to keep him out the beginning of the season, probably about 2 or 3 games, maybe 4 at the most. So dealing with some injuries there, but I think they should also be encouraged by what they've seen from the young receivers so far.
How about at running back, Elliot? I know Miles Sanders is the guy there now. Is he ready to be like a top-tier running back, like join the Saquons and Kamaras, and maybe McCaffrey's even ahead of those guys at this point, but is he ready to take that step? And were you surprised? Were they in on Fournette at all? And since they didn't get him, will they be in on Adrian Peterson, you think, at all?
Well, they have looked for veteran running backs this offseason. Devontae Freeman's a guy they talked to. Carlos Hyde they talked to. Even LaShawn McCoy, potential reunion there. So there have been some attempts on their part to add a veteran. Now, I think they're doing that mostly as insurance for Miles Sanders potentially being injured. He's dealing with a hamstring injury that kept him out most of camp. They are counting on him being the guy. I think you could see him get close to 300 touches, 280, something like that. He's dynamic. He's great in the pass game. He can pass block. I think he improved as a pure runner as the year went on last year in terms of finding the hole and being more decisive. Sometimes you see rookies a little hesitant early on. So I think Miles Sanders at the end of the year, barring offensive line issues, which I think they have, but barring that, like, he's going to be in that discussion. I don't know if he's as kind of freakish as Saquon and the plays he can make, but I think he can be just as productive. He can be a workhorse. And I think he is more of a Christian McCaffrey type of guy. Now, that's a high ceiling, but I think you could see him, get 70 or 80 targets, 60-something catches. He was one of the best receiving running backs in the league last year, and I think that will only improve. So I know he's shooting for 2,000 total miles, and I think 2,000 total yards from Miles, I should say. And I think he has a chance.
Miles, a lot of yards.
It'd be a lot. I mean, maybe if he plays the Giants defense every week. I don't know. He only gets to play them twice. So
I love it. You said the offensive line is maybe the shakiest you've seen in your 7, 8, 9 years. How about the linebackers? I don't know if it was you or one of the other Philly writers said something about, like, this could be the worst linebacker core that they've had in a while too, right?
Yeah, the good news is it doesn't really matter at all because we're in position, right? I mean, they're only going to play 2 linebackers at a time. At time, they might only play 1. I think you're going to see a lot of defensive backs on the field. But I also think the linebackers are better than people give them credit for. I think Nate Gary has really improved. He was a former college safety. This will be his 4th year, so I think he's much more comfortable in the position. TJ Edwards was a full-time starter in college, every down linebacker. This is his 2nd year. I think he'll be strong against the run. And they added 2 linebackers in the draft, in Sean Bradley and Davion Taylor. So I think they'll be fine at linebacker. But again, I don't think linebacker decides or, helps their defense really. It's going to be what the defensive line does. It's going to be what the secondary does. And you hope that the linebackers can just make a play for you occasionally.
Well, what about the rookies, Elliot? Talk a little bit about maybe some of the mid-round, late-round, or undrafted rookies that might have looked pretty impressive so far this camp.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, John Hightower and Quez Watkins, 2 receivers they took late in the draft. They had an outstanding training camp. The Eagles got 51 catches and 15 touchdowns in training camp from their rookies alone. So they were incredibly productive, and they were really able to lean on them and kind of show that they're ready to take on a larger role. Other guys that had good camps from the undrafted class, Adrian Killens, really kind of a Donnell Pumphrey, Darren Sproles type of body, not as big as Darren Sproles, but very quick, can be dynamic in the passing game. You saw him get some team reps with the first team offense as camp went on, and I think that he could potentially be back on the practice squad. So, early on, they'll lean on Reagor. Obviously, who knows with Jalen Hurts. The 3rd-round pick, Davion Taylor. Linebacker Sean Bradley was their 5th-round pick. So they will get more snaps, I think, this year from their rookies than in years past. But again, you're going to have to lean on the veterans because of the injury to Jalen Reagor and the fact Jalen Hurts isn't really going to play. The late-round picks, you hope they perform, but it's hard to lean on those guys early on.
Okay, up front, the big free agent acquisition was Javon Hargrave. How's he feeling injury-wise? He's got that pec injury, and what's his addition mean to this defense up front?
Well, if he was healthy, it would mean a lot. I think he's a guy that coming out of a 3-4 system in Pittsburgh, he can be a much better pass rusher in an Eagles system where he'll be asked just to pin his ears back and go, and he won't have to worry about the run as much. And I think he can be, coming out of college, he was viewed more as a pass rusher, I think, or at least having a set of pass rushing moves. The issue is he's not practicing. And when you combine the fact that he's going to miss all of training camp with the fact that there was no OTAs, no mini camp, that matters for a defensive lineman. These past 2 years, the Eagles have seen Fletcher Cox miss training camp. He had a down year. Brandon Graham missed training camp in 2018. He had a down year. So I do think Javon Hargrave, although he's a very good player, I think he can be a difference maker. I'm not very optimistic for what he can be early on. And I think you're looking at more week, like 7 or 8 until he'll play before then, but he might not be that dynamic player that they hoped he could be until midway through the season and he's able to get his legs under him.
The Eagles go 4-0 against the Redskins and the Giants, right?
Well, definitely the Giants. I mean, the Giants are going to be a dumpster fire. But I mean,
The
Washington
football team. Sorry.
Yeah. Washington always plays them well. I mean, look, the Eagles last year were down, I think, 21-3 to them at halftime, or maybe it was 21-10. And then in week 16 or 15 last year, they almost lost that game too. They needed a last-minute touchdown drive. So I think Washington could be difficult for them just because of how good their defensive line is. Chase Young versus Matt Pryor is going to be potentially very ugly and bad for Carson Wentz. So I think that Washington could definitely beat them in week 1. But yeah, you hope that at worst, if you're the Eagles, you go 3-1 against those two teams.
So basically, they're a 9-10 win team, compete with the Cowboys for the NFC East, and probably both teams go to the playoffs again. That's kind of how you feel?
Look, I think that that's probably what happens, but we all know that if you have a bad offensive line, that really matters. I mean, the quarterback is the most important position, but you can't win the NFL with a bad offensive line. So as excited as they are about Darius Slay, as excited as they are about Hargrave, Carson coming back healthy, those things aren't going to matter if the offensive line isn't any good. So when I watch this team in training camp, I see an 8-8 team. I think maybe even closer to 7-9 than 10-6. Like, I see major issues with this line. Now, if the line's not an issue, they can absolutely win the division. I think Mike McCarthy in Dallas is going to be an improvement for them. I think you'll see the Cowboys win at least 10 games. So I think the Eagles are going to be hard-pressed to win the division. But when you look at the fact that the other two teams are just so bad, I think it'll definitely be the Eagles and Dallas competing for the title.
A couple more things I wanted to ask you here, Elliot. Talk about the Doug Peterson relationship with the fans. From the outside, I hear a lot of analysts, maybe even some fans. Oh yeah, they had success and won the Super Bowl. That was because Frank Reich was there. So
right.
What is the relationship with the fans and Doug Peterson?
They love him. I mean, they absolutely love him. I mean, look, put aside the fact that he brought the first Super Bowl championship to the city. Like, that aside, they have a lot of confidence in Doug. He's great with the media in terms of, sending messages to the fans through the media. He's a very likable guy. Of course, when they lose, Monday morning is never pretty for any coach in Philadelphia or any coach of any football team. But no, I mean, fans love Doug. I think that if this season goes poorly, you'll see Howie Roseman get more blame from the fans. You'll see, potentially even Carson Wentz get more blame. But I would be surprised if, at least from a fan perspective, if Doug is somebody they turn on.
And lastly, special teams. The special teams unit, not all that great the last couple of years. So how is it looking so far this year, all across the board, really?
Well, they had Jalen Reagor at punt and kick returner. Now, obviously, he's out with a shoulder injury. So I think you could potentially see Corey Clement step in there and be the kick returner. At punt returner, I'm not so sure. Maybe Greg Ward. You could see Deshaun Jackson do it at times in big spots. So that's a question. But one thing the Eagles do have that a lot of teams, struggle to find for, and the Eagles kind of take it for granted, is they have an amazing kicker and amazing punter. They haven't had to worry about that for the last few years. Jake Elliott is not only a really good kicker, he's clutch. He's made big kicks for them over the years. They can trust him in big spots. And Cam Johnson, I mean, again, it's a punter, so it is what it is. But, he just goes out there every week and does a great job. So they'll have good special teams. They might not be like a dynamic return team, but I don't think the special teams will lose them any games this year.
Excellent. Elliot, appreciate. Oh, you wanted to.
You gave me a couple flashbacks there with Deshaun Jackson at punt returner and Jake Elliott's clutch field goal.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I got some giant shivers there.
Yeah, I hope Giants fans, just close their ears for that.
Oh, by the way, the first 3 weeks of the season, the Eagles have to get off to a good start, don't they, with that schedule?
Yeah, I mean, look, Washington week 1, like I said, I think that'll be a tough game. I think all week 1 games are such toss-ups this year. But, I mean, LA Rams week 2 is difficult. They have the 49ers early on, the Ravens, the Steelers. So there's some tough games early on.
All right, Elliot. So it's Elliot Shore Parks. That's also your Twitter handle, and 94WIP.com. That's where the listeners can check you out. And how often are you on the air talking Eagles football?
I'm on almost every day calling in, and then you can listen to my actual show Saturday.
Elliot, appreciate it. We look forward to talking to you during the season.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks.
All right. So, Ryan, what do you think about the trend? This is like the best division trend in the NFL going. It's been 15 years since an NFC East team has repeated. So,
I don't think they'll repeat. The Eagles won it last year, right? I don't think they'll repeat. I don't think they'll repeat. I think it's the Cowboys' year.
I
honestly.
agree.
But it's 50-50. I mean, the Redskins and the Giants are not very good. So it's, like I said to Elliot in my question, I kind of gave away what I think. I think one team's 9-7, the other team's 10-6. Which is which? I don't know. It'll probably be decided the last time they play each other in December.
Yeah, I mean, you look at but look, if you do look at the schedule, and look, and I understand because I like the Rams. We talked about that. But if the Eagles are going to have a good year, I do think they have to at least start 2-1. I mean, you got the Washington, the Rams, and the Bengals. You have to start 2-1 if you're going to be considered, if you're going to take advantage. And I understand they're going to be able to get those games you talked about with the Giants and Washington, but that's one of those games, Washington. So win 2 out of 3, and I think the Eagles used to start feeling a little okay. You're in a good spot, but if you go 1-2 with that schedule, you might be in trouble.
Yes, absolutely. No, I definitely think you need to get off to a good start. Look, we know how schedules work in the NFL, right? NFC East, all the NFC East teams basically have the same schedule except for 2 games, and the NFC East teams have a brutal schedule this year. They get the NFC West teams, so you get, Seattle, good. Arizona, improved. LA, we don't know much about, but they were in the Super Bowl 2 years. 49ers in the Super Bowl last year. And then you get the AFC North, Ravens, Steelers, improved Browns. I mean, that's a brutal crossover schedule.
All right, now, Giants talk coming up in a few minutes with Paul Schwartz, one of your colleagues there at the New York Post. So we'll do that. We'll have our 2020 preview show next week at some point. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll have to figure it out, but it'll be before kickoff on Thursday. So, Ryan, everything else going okay?
Yeah, everything's good.
I'm
rolling along.
Hey, I'm looking forward to talking to your Giants football in just a little while with Paul Schwartz.
Yeah, big weekend here. Rosters get trimmed down, and you really get a feel for what teams are. You wouldn't have expected Adrian Peterson to get cut today.
That's right. It's only the beginning. Thanks a lot, Ryan. We'll talk to you soon. And again, thanks to Elliot for helping us talk Eagles football. We'll talk Giants football in just a little while here on the OFN Today.